Given that definition of socialism, that it's worker-based and it's democracy in the workplace, do you consider Bernie Sanders a socialist?
No, he's an old-fashioned liberal in American terms, a New Deal liberal. He has social programs. Medicare for All socializes insurance, not the whole medical system. But the problem is, and he said in his speech on socialism in 2015, when he was labeled a democratic socialist, he said, "I am," and he pointed to Denmark and Sweden and Norway as models. He said, "I'm not for," the way he phrased it was, "not for government ownership of the means of production." Socialism means social ownership, which can be a unit of government, not necessarily the national government. It could be the local government, like your public power utility, or your water system, or your school system. But it can also be cooperatives. But he said real clearly, he's not talking about collectivizing in a public or a private way the means of production, at least the large-scale means of production. And without doing that, his social programs are vulnerable because that concentrated economic power translates into concentrated political power. And I'm not just talking about campaign donations. I'm talking about the veto power that capital has over public policy, because it can decide to go on a strike of capital. When France elected a socialist named Francois Mitterrand in the early 80s, he had a pretty radical reform program. We're going to socialize a number of industries, improve benefits for working people, and capital started fleeing and was wrecking the economy. He had to back off. When Dennis Kucinich was elected in 1976, he was called the boy mayor of Cleveland. He was, in his 20s, and even today he looks like a young man. He's in his late 60s. But he ran on a promise that he would not privatize their public power system, which the suburban utility that surrounded Cleveland wanted to do, and the Cleveland business elite and the banking elite wanted to do. They were going to make a lot of money on that deal. And unlike most politicians, he kept his promise. So the bank said, "All right, Mayor Kucinich, you don't play ball with us, we're not going to roll over your line of credit." $13 million then for the city of Cleveland. Now every business and every municipality needs a line of credit because revenues are up and down. A municipality, like property taxes come in quarters, and a lot of them. They aren't there every week. You get federal money, in a big bunch, state money in a big bunch. So you got to have a line of credit for the ups and downs so you can meet payroll and immediate expenses. By withdrawing that line of credit, they pushed the city into bankruptcy. And of course, Kucinich got blamed. So that's power that's not even up for election. And if you don't deal with that, you're going to have a hollow political democracy. So you got to have economic democracy, real socialism. And that's where I think Bernie comes short. And that's where social democracy in Europe fell short. And that's how you could get, Margaret Thatcher come in and roll back a whole lot of things in Britain. And then when Labour comes back in, Tony Blair is looking more like Bill Clinton than a socialist. Corbyn is going back to the old Labour Party, which is a big surprise to me. The Greens were growing by leaps and bounds, and then Corbyn basically did what they were doing, and of course Labour had a longer tradition, and that growth went into the Labour Party. So it's interesting. The Greens, and the Labour left have a lot in common over there. It's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. But anyway, the point is, Bernie, without calling for social ownership, democratic ownership of major means of production, is setting himself up for being in a lot of trouble when he tries to do things if he becomes president.